Sometimes life feels like a fight you didn't sign up for, like you woke up in the middle of a storm you didn't see coming. You've prayed, you've cried, and maybe you've even wondered if God's still listening. But what if I told you the help you've been waiting for is already here? What if I told you that heaven has been moving even in the silence, that God has not abandoned you, but He's aligning things for you? See, the enemy wants you to think you're stuck, forgotten, overlooked, but today we're going to break that lie, because there are signs, 7 divine markers that God is not just with you. He is helping you, guiding you, preparing you. You didn't find this moment by accident, so lean in. Don't just hear me, hear Him through this message, because if you've been questioning where God is, He's about to show you that He's been here all along. There are moments in your life when everything feels uncertain, when the questions in your soul speak louder than the answers in your mind. You try to move forward, but every step feels shaky. You smile on the outside, but inside you're wrestling with doubt, wrestling with weariness, wrestling with wondering if God really sees you. And I want to speak to that place today, not your church face, not the person people think has it all together. I want to speak to the part of you that lays awake at night wondering, God, where are you in this? Because the first sign that God is helping you, the first evidence that heaven hasn't forgotten your name is this: you're still standing. Now, I know that doesn't sound flashy. It might not seem like much, but hear me with your spirit, not just your ears. When life came to break you, it didn't succeed. When the storm came to drown you, you didn't sink. When the pressure pushed in on every side, yes, you bent, but you didn't break. Do you realize how many times you almost gave up? Do you realize how close you came to walking away from everything, your purpose, your calling, your peace, and yet something inside of you held you up? That something was someone the enemy tried. Oh, he tried. He whispered to you that you were alone. He threw confusion at your mind. He orchestrated delay after delay, hoping to make you doubt what God said. But what he didn't factor in is the grace that has been keeping you when your strength ran out. There is a divine keeping power that doesn't always feel loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it just shows up as enough strength to get out of bed. Sometimes it's a tear that turns into a prayer when you don't even know what to say. That's help. That's God. And sometimes we miss His hand because we're looking for fireworks when He's moving in whispers. You're still standing, and that is not small. It's not accidental. It's not just resilience. It's not just personality. It's not because you're naturally strong. It's because the Spirit of the living God has been undergirding you, lifting you, stabilizing you when your world was shaking. When you cried out, even when you didn't have the words, He heard you. And not only did He hear you, He sent help in the form of grace for the day. Help in the form of peace that didn't make sense. Help in the form of friends who called you out of nowhere, of a sermon that hit your heart just right, of a verse that came alive when you were about to collapse. You've been carried. You've been held. You've been sustained. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't in what God changes around you, it's what He holds together within you. The fact that you're not bitter, that's a miracle. The fact that you can still worship, that's a miracle. The fact that you didn't let the trauma define you, even though it tried, that's a miracle. You've been attacked, but you're not destroyed. You've been tired, but you didn't quit. You've been uncertain, but you still believe. And I came to tell you that's the evidence. That's the first sign. Don't overlook it because it doesn't look dramatic. God's help is not always seen in what changes around you. Sometimes it's revealed in what doesn't change in you. Your faith didn't die, your hope didn't disappear, you're still here, and that's enough proof to shut the enemy's mouth. Because every time you get up one more time, you're declaring war on the lie that said you wouldn't make it. Every time you pray again, trust again, love again, you're proving the devil wrong. You didn't make it this far by accident. You made it because God was helping you, even when you didn't realize it. Maybe you thought He left you because the pain was still present, but God's help doesn't always look like immediate rescue. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Sometimes it looks like learning to walk through the fire and not be burned. Sometimes it looks like standing in the storm and knowing you're not standing alone. You thought you were surviving, but you were actually overcoming. So the next time you feel like you don't have evidence that God is helping you, take a breath, check your pulse, look at your scars, they're healed, not open. Remember the nights you thought you wouldn't make it to morning, but you did. Remember the valleys you thought would be your grave. But you walked through. Remember the tears you thought would drown you, but they didn't. You didn't survive on your own. You were held, and the same God who helped you stand then is helping you now. You are still standing not because the battle wasn't real, but because God is more real. You are still standing not because you're unshakable, but because he is unchanging. And if he held you up before, he will carry you again. So the next time the enemy tries to convince you that you're forgotten, remind him, I'm still here, and that's all the proof I need. Because standing even in weakness is still standing. And every breath you take, every step you choose to keep walking, every time you refuse to bow to fear, it is heaven's whisper through your life. I am with you, I am helping you, I will never leave you. That is not just motivation. That is covenant, that is promise, that is God, and that is your sign. Sometimes we think that God's help has to look like open doors, like promotions, like a yes to every prayer we pray. But what if I told you that one of the ways you know God is helping you is by what he blocks? We don't often praise God for the no's. We don't usually shout when a plan falls through or a relationship ends. But hindsight is the holy place where we finally realize that what didn't happen saved us. We cry over closed doors without realizing that God's hand was on the knob the whole time. He saw what you didn't see. He heard what you didn't hear behind the scenes. He knew what was waiting on the other side of the thing you were begging for. And because he loves you too much to let you walk into destruction dressed up as destiny, he shut it down. That delay that made you frustrated, that opportunity that looked perfect but slipped through your fingers. That person who walked away and never gave you closure, what if that was God's protection, not punishment? What if that was his mercy in disguise? You thought the door closed because you weren't good enough. You thought the silence meant you were forgotten. But what if God was saying, I'm not withholding something from you. I'm withholding something for you. Because everything you ask for isn't always aligned with everything he has for you. You see, there are seasons where we chase things that are beneath our calling. We settle for less because we don't see the full picture. We fall in love with potential, not purpose. We attach ourselves to comfort instead of obedience. And so God, in his mercy, disrupts our plans before they disrupt our lives. That's not rejection, that's redirection, and redirection is holy. God is not in the business of letting his children wander aimlessly. He leads, he guides, he corrects, and yes, he blocks what needs to be blocked. Sometimes he lets something fall apart so you won't. Sometimes he allows the thing to collapse so you can finally let go of what you were never meant to carry. And when that happens, it can feel like loss, it can feel like confusion, but beneath the discomfort is divine orchestration. You prayed for purpose, but purpose will never come without pruning. You asked for clarity, and clarity often begins with God removing what clouds your vision. You said, God, take anything that's not for me, and then got surprised when he started doing it. But this is what love looks like from a sovereign God. He loves you enough to disrupt the plans you made without him. He loves you enough to say no to the temporary so he can say yes to the eternal. He loves you enough to take you the long way around so you don't self-destruct on the shortcut, because some doors are traps, not opportunities. And some people are assignments, not partners, and some places you wanted to go would have taken you out before you ever got to purpose. And even when you don't understand why he did it, you can trust that he did it. Because when God says no, it is never empty. It is always filled with a bigger yes that's waiting in a higher place. We get frustrated because we're so focused on what we lost, we miss why we were spared. There are things God blocked that you didn't even know were dangerous. There are betrayals that broke your heart but saved your future. There are rejections that crushed your pride but preserved your purpose. And maybe that's the sign you've been overlooking, not the miracle that showed up, but the one that never got the chance to break you. The help of God is not always loud. It's not always seen. It's not always posted on Instagram. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's the absence of chaos that could have been, sometimes it's the job you didn't get because he knew you would have lost your faith in that environment, sometimes it's the door that never opened because God knew you would have walked through it and never come back. We want God to move, but we don't always want him to remove. But his help comes with both. He will make a way and he will stop you when you're going the wrong way. He will close what needs to be closed so you don't compromise what he's opening in you. It's not punishment, it's preparation. You're being set up, not shut down. So the next time a door closes, the next time a friendship fades, the next time an answer doesn't come, I want you to pause. Take a breath, and instead of asking why, God, start asking what are you protecting me from? Because trust is built in the in-between. Trust grows when you don't get what you want, but you believe that he's still good. Faith is not proven in the blessing, it's proven in the blocking. And maybe, just maybe, the blessing is the blocking. Because if it had worked out the way you wanted, it would have kept you from the place you need to be. There's a divine detour written all over your life, and it didn't start yesterday. It's been there all along. Some of the greatest testimonies are born not from the doors that opened, but from the ones that didn't. You think you're waiting on God, but sometimes God's waiting on you to stop grieving what he already buried. You think you're being delayed, but maybe you've been delivered from cycles, from distractions, from spiritual sabotage. God's help doesn't always show up in what he gives. It shows up in what he withholds, because he knows what you need before you even know what to ask for. And even in your disappointment, he is still helping you. So don't be afraid of the closed doors. Don't be discouraged by the endings. Don't be ashamed of the detours, because when God says no, it's not because he's not helping you. It's because he's helping you more than you even realize. And the same hand that closed that door is the same hand that's holding your future. There are seasons when everything in your life feels unstable, like you're walking across a shaking bridge in the dark, unsure if your next step is going to carry you forward or send you falling. You can't see the whole picture, you can't predict what's coming, and somewhere in that uncertainty, your mind starts to race. Questions swirl. What if I fail? What if this isn't God? What if I'm making a mistake? And then you notice something strange. In the middle of all that fear, confusion, and emotional noise, there's a stillness that doesn't make sense. Not a stillness from your circumstances, but from deep within you. A quiet peace that settles in the middle of the storm. It's not loud, it's not boastful, it's not even something you can always explain, but it's there, steady, present. That's not coincidence, that's not denial. That's not numbness. That is a sign. One of the clearest ways you know God is helping you is when you experience peace that makes no logical sense. Peace that passes understanding. See, the peace of God doesn't depend on the absence of problems. It's not peace that waits until the diagnosis is reversed, or the money shows up, or the conflict is resolved. It's peace that arrives before the answer, during the pain, while the waiting continues. Because peace is not the product of perfect conditions. It's the fruit of divine presence. And when that peace shows up in your spirit, when you're facing something that should have broken you, and somehow you're calm, that's God. That's his help, that's his spirit doing what only he can do. We are trained to believe peace comes from control. That if we can just fix this, manage that, keep everything in line, we'll feel okay. But God's peace isn't built on your ability to control outcomes. It's built on your willingness to trust him in the unknown. When you should be anxious, but you're not, that's help. When everyone around you is panicking, but something in you says keep going, that's help. When you feel the weight of pressure, but you still have clarity, direction, and the strength to move, that's help. There's a kind of peace that makes no earthly sense, but makes perfect heavenly sense. And it's not fragile, it's not dependent on how much is in your bank account, or who agrees with you, or what the timeline looks like. It's the kind of peace that held Daniel in the lion's den, the kind of peace that walked with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire. The kind of peace that let Jesus sleep in the middle of a storm, not after it, but right in the middle. That's what God gives to his children, because his help doesn't always look like removing the storm. Sometimes it looks like anchoring your soul so the storm doesn't remove you, and we need to stop measuring peace by comfort. Sometimes the peace of God will sit with you in the most uncomfortable places and remind you that even though the situation isn't changing yet, you are changing in it. You're becoming stronger. You're learning to trust. You're realizing that you don't need all the answers to feel safe. You just need the assurance that the one who holds the answers also holds you. And when you've experienced this kind of peace, you stop craving certainty the way the world does. You stop needing every detail, every confirmation, every step mapped out. You start walking in faith, because peace is proof that God is present. It is the echo of His Spirit within you saying, I'm still here. I'm still in control. You're not alone in this. And when that voice rises above the noise, when it cuts through the fear and lifts your eyes, that's help. Because let's be real, your peace didn't come from you. You know how easily your thoughts can spiral. You know how quickly you used to react to chaos. But now, something's different. Now you pause. Now you pray before you panic. Now you've got this quiet assurance that doesn't come from books or self help or positive thinking. It comes from God with you. That kind of peace isn't manufactured, it's imparted, and you didn't earn it. You received it. Not because you had everything figured out, but because you surrendered what you couldn't carry. That moment when you said, God, I can't fix this, I can't fight this, but I trust you to carry me through it. That's when the peace came in. Peace comes when we stop trying to be our own savior. Peace comes when we trade our plan for His presence. Peace comes when we surrender control and receive grace. And if you're feeling that peace even in the waiting, even in the hardship, even in the uncertainty, don't ignore it. That's a sign. It's not normal peace. It's not worldly peace. It's His peace, and His peace is supernatural. It's stabilizing. It's sustaining. It allows you to walk through hard things with holy confidence. It allows you to face what scared you yesterday and speak faith over it today. It allows you to sit in a valley and still believe the mountain is coming. That's not naivety. That's not delusion. That's divine help. The kind of help that strengthens you from the inside out. The kind of help that doesn't always shout, but always shows up. And maybe, just maybe, that's why you've been able to keep going. Not because it's been easy, but because peace carried you when strength couldn't. So if today you're in a battle, and your questions are louder than your answers, but somehow there's still a calm within you, don't dismiss it. Don't downplay it. That's God. That's a sign. He is helping you not just by changing things around you, but by changing you in the middle of it all. And His peace is the evidence. You ever find yourself in a season where it feels like nothing is moving, nothing is growing, nothing is changing, but somehow something inside you is shifting? Like you're still in the same job, the same environment, surrounded by the same issues, but your perspective is different. You don't react the same. You're not triggered the way you used to be. What used to break you doesn't faze you the same way anymore. You're not perfect, but you're different. That's a sign, another way God helps you. And maybe one of the most powerful ways by transforming you from the inside out. See, we often ask God to change the situation. But what He often chooses to do first is change us in the situation, and we overlook it because we're so focused on what hasn't moved externally. We think, God, I'm still here. But God is saying, yes, but you're not the same. It takes divine power to shift a soul. It takes heaven's help to transform bitterness into compassion, fear into courage, and pain into purpose. So if you want to know whether God is helping you, look at your response to the same battles you used to lose. You used to break under pressure, but now you pray. You used to cuss them out, but now you pause and walk away. You used to give up easily, but now you fight differently. You're not where you want to be yet, but you're no longer where you used to be, and that's help. God has been shaping you, and transformation is one of the most beautiful signs of divine assistance because it doesn't happen through willpower alone. It happens when you've been spending time with the Father. Real change is not behavior modification. Real change is spiritual renovation, and let's be honest, it doesn't always feel good. Sometimes God helps you by confronting what's been hiding in you for too long. He shines a light on the trauma you buried. He exposes the pride you masked as confidence. He surfaces the unforgiveness you thought you moved on from, not to shame you, but to free you. Because you can't heal what you won't confront, and you can't conquer what you're still pretending doesn't exist. So when God begins to stir things in your spirit, when He starts making you uncomfortable in old patterns, don't resist that. That's not condemnation, that's transformation, that's help. You asked God to take you higher, but you can't carry dead weight into the next level. You asked Him to enlarge your territory, but He has to first enlarge your character. You asked for blessing, but He has to build you so the blessing doesn't crush you. So He starts working on you, quietly, deeply, intentionally. He begins healing your cell, Image so you stop shrinking around people. He begins teaching you discipline so you don't waste another season. He begins stripping your identity from performance and planting it in his promises, and it's not overnight, it's not glamorous, it's not something people always notice. But deep within, something's happening. You feel it in the way you worship, in the way you think, in the way you forgive people who never apologized, in the way you wait without whining, in the way you handle silence without spiraling. That's God, that's maturity, that's spiritual growth, that's divine transformation, and transformation is the type of help that stays with you even when the situation doesn't change, because miracles can get you out, but transformation keeps you free. Deliverance can pull you from bondage, but transformation teaches you how to walk without chains, and that's what God wants for you, not just moments of breakthrough, but a life that reflects Him. You're not just being rescued, you're being refined. You're not just being helped, you're being healed, and one of the clearest signs that God is in your story is not in what you gain, but in what you outgrow. You outgrow petty arguments, you outgrow shallow validation. You outgrow toxic cycles you used to confuse with love. You outgrow fear-based decisions. That's not ego, that's evolution. That's evidence that you've been spending time with the refiner, because when God is helping you, He'll prune you. He'll take off what's no longer needed for where you're going, and you'll start to notice the change, not because everything around you got easier, but because you got stronger. You'll hear yourself say things like, I used to stress about this, but I have peace now. I used to run when things got hard, but I've learned to stay and grow. I used to think I had to prove myself, but now I know who I am. That's not hype, that's the Holy Spirit. That's not self-help, that's sanctification. And it means your process is working because God's goal was never to just get you to a destination. It was to develop you into someone who could carry what He placed on your life. He doesn't just help you escape. He helps you become patient, become resilient, become bold, become humble, become the kind of person who reflects the light of Christ, not just in what you say, but in how you live, and that takes time. That takes submission. That takes yielding to the process even when it's uncomfortable. But every step of it, every layer that's peeling back, every mindset that's shifting, every moment where you're learning to trust instead of control His help. Divine help, because the most powerful help God gives isn't always what He puts in your hand. It's who He shapes you into while you're waiting for the promise. So if you've been feeling that internal shift, if your cravings are changing, if your prayers are maturing, if your capacity is increasing, that's help, and no one else may see it. They may still treat you like the old version of yourself. They may not recognize what God is doing in you. But that doesn't mean it's not real. It just means it's holy, because God does His best work in hidden places. And when He's finished refining you in private, He'll release you in public. Not just to show off your blessing, but to reflect His glory. So don't ignore the inner shift. Don't downplay your growth. Don't despise the process, because the transformation you're experiencing is the sign you've been praying for. God is helping you, not by removing the mountain, but by turning you into the kind of person who climbs it. And when you get to the top, you'll look back and realize, I didn't just survive that season. I became someone in that season, and it was all because God was helping me, even when I didn't know how to help myself. There are moments in life when doors close unexpectedly. Opportunities you prayed for fall through. People you depended on walk away. Plans you made unravel. And in those moments, it's tempting to believe you've been forsaken, forgotten, punished, left behind. But what if I told you that the very thing you thought was rejection, was protection? What if that no you cried over was actually mercy? What if that delay wasn't punishment, but preparation? See, we don't always recognize the hand of God in the moment, because His help doesn't always feel like help. Sometimes it feels like loss, like failure, like disappointment, but in reality, it's Him redirecting what you thought you needed so He can reveal what He actually prepared for you. One of the clearest signs God is helping you is when He blocks what would have broken you, even when you don't understand why. He doesn't just open doors. Sometimes He shuts them, not to harm you, not to withhold something from you, but to preserve what he's doing in you. You prayed for that relationship to work out, but it didn't. You begged him for that job, but it fell through. You tried to make that dream happen, but it kept hitting walls. And you thought you failed, but in hindsight, months later, sometimes even years, you realized that was God. That closed door was his kindness. That ending was his beginning. That detour was his direction. See, the Father sees what we can't. He knows what's behind that opportunity you're so desperate to have. He knows the long-term cost of the short-term thrill. He knows the weight of what looks good but isn't grounded in him. And because he loves you, he'll shut it down, not to deprive you, but to develop you, not to ruin your plans, but to realign them. We serve a God who loves us too much to give us what we want when he knows it's not what we need. And sometimes the most powerful form of help is when he says no, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom, because his no now is protecting your yes later. His delay is shaping your discernment. His silence is building your stamina. And you won't always understand it in the moment. Your heart will ache, your mind will question, your soul will wrestle, but deeper still beyond the noise, there will be a whisper, trust me, I'm helping you. Because if he let you have that thing you're crying over, it might have fed your ego but starved your soul. If he let you go through that door, it might have given you attention but taken your peace. If he allowed that relationship to continue, it might have distracted you from your purpose. So instead of pushing you into what you wanted, he protected you from what would have poisoned your purpose. That's not rejection. That's divine redirection. And if you really pay attention, you'll notice how God's protection shows up in the details. That person ghosted you, but their motives weren't pure. That offer expired, but the environment was toxic. That plan fell apart, but your spirit felt unsettled anyway. You were disappointed, yes, but if you're honest, you're grateful now. Because had you stayed, you would have shrunk had you gotten it. You wouldn't have grown had it worked. You wouldn't have needed him, and God's help doesn't always feel like wind at your back. Sometimes it feels like resistance in your path. But even that resistance is love, because he knows what he's doing with your life, and he doesn't just want you to succeed. He wants you to thrive in what he's called you to. He doesn't want to give you something prematurely and watch it crush you. He wants to make sure the platform doesn't become a prison. So he holds back, not because he's far, but because he's wise, and you might not see it clearly right now. But you will. You'll look back on this moment and thank God he didn't answer the way you expected. You'll look back and realize the heartbreak had a hidden lesson. The delay carried a deeper grace. The rejection carried redirection. You'll say, had that door opened, I would have never discovered what God really had for me. And that's what trust looks like. That's what faith grows through. It grows through unanswered prayers that later reveal better plans. It grows through doors that didn't open so you could walk through the one you were created for, because God doesn't do random. He does intentional, and if he's allowing something to fall apart, it's only because he's building something better. You might not see it yet, but there's strategy in the silence. There's clarity in the collapse. There's favor in the fallout. Sometimes what feels like being left out is actually being set apart. God is positioning you for something that doesn't look like what you expected, but it's exactly what you need. So don't curse the closed door. Don't resent the detour. Don't panic in the pause. Recognize the fingerprints of a God who loves you enough to disappoint you in the moment to deliver you into destiny later. His help is not always comfortable, but it's always complete. And when you walk with him long enough, you begin to understand that unanswered prayers are sometimes the loudest answers of all. Because if it wasn't him, you don't want it. If it wasn't his will, you don't need it. And if it wasn't part of his plan, you won't miss it. Because what he has for you is still yours. He's not just preparing the blessing, he's preparing you. So let him close what needs to be closed. Let him end what you were too afraid to walk away from. Let him remove what your flesh craved but your spirit couldn't carry. That's help, that's love, that's protection. And it's one of the most undeniable signs that the God who sees the end from the beginning is guiding your steps. Even through the shutdowns, the slow seasons, and the silent stretches, he's not punishing you. He's preserving you because what's ahead is too great for you to be attached to what was never meant to last. So breathe, trust, and know this. When God closes a door, he doesn't just leave you outside. He leads you to the right one. Because his help might not always look like an open door, but it always leads to a better one.